started. Thank you. Thank you everyone for chatting in your cookies. I will now be sufficiently distracted during this entire thing, thinking about cookie recipes. So welcome. Thank you all for joining our As the Cookie Crumbles Roundtable. We are thrilled to have so many people joining us. We know this is starting, or officially is the busy time of year for a lot of us, especially our fundraisers in the group. So we appreciate the time and look forward to really digging into all things cookie depreciation with you. Before we get into the good stuff, a little bit about us. M&R is 130 something really smart, talented people who work exclusively with nonprofits in support of social change. We specialize in digital fundraising and advocacy, media relations, digital organizing, social media, and of course, advertising. A couple of logistics. First, we have captions enabled for this conversation. Hopefully that helps for folks that may need it or like to have the extra captions available. Please ask your questions in the chat with 3 question marks ahead of it, just so it's easier to sort of sort out what is a question and what is a cookie recipe opinion. And we have a lot of help in the chat that's gonna be helping Serena and myself answer those questions. And speaking of the folks in this call, with me today is my colleague Zareen Tawarson. Zareen joined M&R after working for many years at an ad tech vendor. At M&R, she leads fundraising, acquisition, awareness strategies for clients like Feeding America and SEIU. The great thing about Zareen is she has this incredible knack for sussing out what tactics or platforms are worth the hype and which ones aren't. And so I'm really thrilled she's going to be sharing some of those smarts with us today. Also joining us in the chat is Kristen Chauvin, our Vice President of Advertising at M&R. She specializes in fundraising and brand awareness strategies for clients like the World Wildlife Fund, Planned Parenthood, and USA for UNHCR. Before she came to M&R, she worked and managed digital strategy for a variety of corporate and Fortune 500 clients. And like I said, we'll be pausing periodically to answer questions, but please keep chatting your questions in as you think about them. Kristen's going to be responding to them, and she might, pause us to answer a couple of them as we go along.
Thanks, Gwen. I'm also very happy to be joined by Gwen Emmons. Over the course of 12 years at M&R, Gwen's copywriting, art direction, and strategic insights have inspired people to donate, raised awareness about important causes, compelled people to take action, and even turned out people to vote. She specializes in using data to help organizations understand and reach their audiences and deliver tailored creative that connects and converts. She's also an avid baker and has put together some of M&R employees' favorite cookie recipes at the end of this deck.
Always really excited to marry both the personal and professional interests here. All right, let's jump in.
Cool. Yeah, let's first run through a quick level set of what's going on here. So what cookies are, why they're important to us in the first place, and how their crumbling is going to affect advertisers moving forward. So first off, what is a cookie? A cookie is basically a piece of software code that gets installed on your web browser when you visit a website. Now that website can identify you and recognize your subsequent visits. So you can sort of think of a cookie as a coat check for your browser. You hand over your coat to the desk and get a ticket in exchange. The coat could be anything, your website activity, what's in your shopping cart, etc. So how have advertising companies leveraged these cookies? Advertising companies also place their cookies on these sites, which help them to show relevant ads that match your preferences and interests. If you've heard this phrase, targeting the right person at the right time on the right device, this is sort of how that gets done. So ad tech companies have been able to build sophisticated AI algorithms to sort of dynamically score each advertising opportunity or ad impression based on its propensity to get a user to take a specified action. And by having visibility across all of the sites, ads can be super highly targeted and based on user behavior. So while your coat is sitting at the coat check and you're enjoying your dinner or concert, advertisers are bidding on your ticket because they know it's yours when you come back to claim it. So why is the industry moving away from this? Why are cookies crumbling? Cookies have already started being depreciated across web browsers. So first Safari and Firefox, with Chrome's depreciation beginning in 2023. And since Chrome holds about 64% of market share, the biggest impact is sort of going to be when this happens in 2023. And all of this is really happening because users like us are demanding greater privacy, transparency, choice, and control over how their data is being used online. And the good news here is that cookies were created back in 1994, and they currently don't really allow tracking over mobile apps or connected TV. So the opportunity for the industry as a whole to sort of come up with a new solution is really highly incentivized by billions of dollars of ad spend. So right, the momentum behind sort of finding a solution to this to protect the basic quid pro quo of the internet, which is sort of seeing relevant ads in exchange for free content on the internet while keeping users' privacy protected, is there. So all that said, how will advertisers and agencies be affected by this shift? We'll likely start seeing decreasing match rates from advertisers' first-party CRM data. Without cookie matching, it's going to be harder to reach your audiences online, and we'll likely see advertisers start to shift to third-party targeting solutions like demographic, geo-targeting, as well as contextual targeting. We'll also start to see less precise targeting due to decreased accuracy in conversion measurement, which may make it harder and more difficult to optimize campaigns. And because of that decreased accuracy in conversion measurement, we'll likely start to see conversions, whether it be donations or leads or website events, be more difficult to measure. Vendors in this space, in the ad tech space, are really sort of awaiting industry-wide adoption of open source or proprietary measurement technology. So you can sort of think of Bluetooth as analogous to what may happen here. Bluetooth was originally developed by Ericsson, but soon gained momentum, and now there's over 30,000 companies using their technology to pair wireless devices. And lastly, there will be an increased importance on emails as a unique ID to match on, as authenticated sign-ins start to replace cookies. And we'll touch on all of this in a little bit more detail later on.
So Serena, I'm curious, like I come at this from the creative side, and I feel like what I read a lot is almost this like the sky is falling, everything is awful, everyone freak out. How are you feeling about the shift to a cookieless world?
Yeah, I know we have some examples later on, and I know some clients at M&R have tested some of the initial solutions that are available, and they've been seeing pretty good results. And as I mentioned, this industry it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and I have good confidence that there will be a solution that sort of gains momentum across the industry. So
cool.
The sky is not falling.
Okay. It's just always good to sort of separate what to worry about and maybe what to worry less about. All right, so that's sort of a snapshot of what's going on and a little primer of what exactly are cookies for those that are less familiar. We're going to spend most of our time today talking about what the heck we should actually do about this. And we've broken this down into what you should be testing, what you should be trying, and the things you should be keeping an eye on, just to give you a little helpful way of thinking about this. So This is not the first hurdle that we've encountered in the ad space, as Rain mentions, and it's honestly not the first hiccup that we've had in like the digital space writ large, right? At M&R, we're used to evolving again and again and sometimes again as the digital landscape sort of shifts and reinvents itself. And what we found from weathering those storms is that to remain successful, in this case, despite cookie depreciation, you're going to want to experiment with a couple of workarounds. And you're still going to keep a very close eye on how you're tracking data and performance internally. I think that's true in general, but it's especially true when the landscape is shifting. Keep an eye on that data. But you're also going to want to keep hanging on to some of the fundamentals of direct response programs, like making really relevant, personalized creative that is still possible without cookies, continuing to test, and using creative in some new ways to connect with and inspire your audience. So yeah, there's probably gonna be some new things you're going to try out, but some of it is just holding on to sort of the fundamentals and the tenets of what we already know how to do as marketers. So let's dive in. And I will first say throughout this deck, you're going to see some previews of some of the recipes that my colleagues and I contributed. These are going to be at the end of the deck. We're going to share the deck with you so you have all of this content and the actual good, delicious stuff of the recipes as well. So like Serene was saying, just because cookies are being depreciated doesn't mean that we're entirely losing our ability to serve really relevant, personalized content to supporters and prospects. The sky is not falling here. It does mean, though, that we have to get a little bit creative with how we do that. And so one of the ways that we can do that is using geo-targeting to deliver sort of regionally specific creative. This is a really easy tactic and provides standout personalization. I will say this is often the concepts that I design and work with on our clients. The ones that are geo-targeted that have, mentioning a state or something specific to the region are often the ones that perform best for our clients. So this example on the left from the National Women's Law Center personalizes this creative by calling out the state of Virginia, and then it's being targeted only to the state of Virginia. And even just including Virginia can make a really big difference in performance. You can also take this a couple steps further. The example on the right actually includes a weather plugin for the state of Florida. So that raindrop is pulling in based on what the weather is like in Florida. And you can certainly get more granular than state. And it connects the weather to a particular action we want to take. So if it's sunny outside, these are about GeoTV volunteering. If it's sunny outside, it's a great day to go canvas. It's a great day to knock on doors. If it's raining outside, it is a beautiful day for phone banking indoors, away from the rain. My recommendation with these is it's relatively low enough to put this together, but you're still having to design creative for different states and run them. I would try this with larger states first, either, for instance, run them in Texas and California and New York, or maybe you know of a couple states where you have a high concentration of donors or volunteers. Run into a couple places first, test it out for you, see how it works before iterating on it for all of the states.
Love those examples, Gwen. So we also wanted to highlight a different type of geo-targeting via these digital out-of-home placements to target members of Congress in airports and in train stations as they traveled back from recess to DC back in September. The strategy of meeting people where they are physically in addition to on the internet can really amplify your geo-targeted buys. What if we have like a very specific ask? In a cookieless world, how can we make sure that the people who are in market for our product or our organization are seeing our messaging? This is where keyword targeting really comes into use. As you can see in this great Aleve PM example, someone who literally has a headache is being served with this very, very relevant ad. And it's not done via cookie targeting. It's done by simply matching to the keyword help and headache within the page content. So how can nonprofits leverage keyword targeting? In the New Jersey monthly example on the bottom left, we can imagine that an ad calling users to help save bees before it's too late could really appeal to beekeepers or people who are interested in keeping bees. And matching to site keywords of beekeeping can really help connect your creative to the content of the page. I will note that these tactics usually produce low scale, but paired with contextual targeting, you can really drive more scale. So broadening your targeting to different contextual categories can help align your messaging with generally relevant content online. So the ad on the top right with a short quiz on if childcare is a mess could be aligned with, general parenting content. And then the ad on the bottom left, speaking specifically about the Yemeni refugee crisis, could be aligned with world news, like the world news section on a news site. And in both of these examples, we know that the creative is aligned with the content of the page, but not as specifically as in the previous examples. Audio and podcast ads are another really great way to contextually target your ads to a specific and engaged audience. And podcast and audio ads really aren't just for branding. In fact, 86% of listeners have said that they've taken an action as a result of a podcast ad. And then 63% have actually bought something after hearing about it in a podcast ad. One of our clients recently tested a large buy across the New York Times Daily podcast. And they ran like a text opt-in asking users to sort of text daily to a short code. And we actually saw that they drove around 550 opt-ins to their SMS program over a short 2-day buy. So we saw something that's great.
That's amazing. I mean, to have a pot, like these steps you have to take to pull out your phone, text something in, like that. I think that says a lot about the power of this as a platform, that you can drive that level of action.
Agreed. I was skeptical that people would remember the actual short code. Yeah, but podcast ads don't really need to be bought on that sort of one-off basis like we did with the daily. They can be purchased across an exchange. So across various podcasts, although targeting for very contextually relevant ones might get harder if you sort of broaden the amount of podcasts that you're buying across. So in the daily example, we were able to measure the impact, but you can always track performance via either something like a vanity URL or use one of the various audio measurement tools.
Yeah. I think especially this year, I've noticed a lot of our clients are really experimenting with a lot of different audio formats for end of year fundraising. So I'm excited to we're throwing a lot of things at the wall and testing a lot of different things. I'm really curious about what we learned from this end of year. Maybe we'll package that up in some sort of little blog post or something to recap things. In addition to podcast ads, mail ads are another great way to reach your first party audience in a cookieless world, because you already have their email addresses. And so these are ads that actually appear in your inbox alongside your TripAdvisor, your Washington Wizards, so all of your other things. There's an ad that will pop up in a relatively unobtrusive way. And I think this is a great way to complement your ads program. So someone is seeing your ads on the New York Times, on a help page while they're trying to Google what to do about their headaches. They may not necessarily click on that ad, but they'll see this ad in their inbox later, be reminded of that ad and click through. I also think this is an excellent way to augment your email program, especially during a high volume time period like end of year. We all know that our supporters' inboxes and everywhere else on the internet, people are targeting our supporters just as much as we are, with emails and ads and all that great stuff. Having something in their inbox like this that stands out just slightly might be the thing that sort of helps cut through some of that noise.
Great. Let's get into some of the workarounds on the tech side, some of which we've tested and some that we're patiently awaiting to hear more about. We recommend that you all start preparing for cookie depreciation starting now, or at least after end of year. The first thing you can start thinking through is matching your CRM data using cookieless solutions. This is important, especially if you have very large CRM files that you're interested in activating against over digital. So you can go ahead and sort of get a sense of pricing and limitations based on your overall list size, or speak to a vendor that has experience with this. M&R has done some initial testing, and we've seen that retargeting the CRM file that was uploaded using this cookieless solution showed about 107% increase in conversion rate, a 16% decrease in cost per donation, and then a 28% increase in average gift. So we're seeing some really great, initial results.
That's awesome.
Okay, so we know these solutions are out there or soon will be, but how do they actually work? There will likely be several solutions that will replace cookies as an industry standard, as I mentioned. These tech companies that were working on proprietary solutions have sort of shifted gears, and they're sort of waiting to see which solutions will gain adoption industry-wide. These solutions will all preserve the value exchange of relevant advertising for advertisers, while improving consumer controls, which is very important. And the likely solution will probably be regulated by the IAB, which is the Internet Advisory Board. So there is going to be like this regulation over, what the solution will be. The first workaround, which is currently available, comes from LiveRamp. They've been a big player in the data onboarding space, so bringing your offline data online. And in the past, if we wanted to upload a CRM file to be able to target it over display advertising, LiveRamp would basically match the PII, or personally identifiable information, to something called an identity link using their identity graph, which basically relies on their cookie data that they have collected. The new cookieless solution uses their existing data, supplemented with email login data where possible. So we went through, so when we went through how advertisers are sort of going to be affected by cookie depreciation, we talked about this, right? Like importance of emails as a unique ID to match on. Match rates really do vary based on multiple factors. And the best way to match the most amount of users is by doing regular uploads of your CRM files. And then on the right-hand side, we have Unified ID 2.0, which might sort of be the future state. We're not sure yet. Again, this technology uses a user's email address, which is gathered from logging into a site or app. So at the login screen, an identifier is sort of created off of this anonymized email address, which is called a unified ID. And then from there, the unified ID is encrypted, it rotates on the back end. Everyone who uses it sort of has to accept a bunch of terms and conditions to opt in, like your multiple devices. Right, and like this is very different than cookies because there wasn't this consent before. So with this initial login, the user basically gets logged into any site that's part of the supply network. So for example, if you are searching for a cookie recipe on Bon Appetit, you'll log in with your email address and then consent to also be logged into, I think it's Condé Nast's like network of sites, right? So next time you go to Pitchfork or the New Yorker or Wired, you'll be logged in automatically and you won't need to like re-accept those terms. And then another interesting thing about this particular solution is that users will be able to log in and actually monitor and adjust how their data is being used.
Interesting.
So we're also recommending advertisers start or continue, just eyeing how you're tracking performance internally instead of relying on in-platform data. So using your CRM, using Google Analytics to double check the number of actions that you're seeing in platform. You can always consider CRM sourcing if you need more granular data on particular audiences or creative. And we're really recommending folks check this frequently. In some cases, we're seeing up to 50% unattributed gifts. So you'll want to be checking in on this quite frequently. And you might also want to consider a conversion event, sort of a little bit up the funnel for more learnings for platforms. So as you may know, the more data your advertising platforms have, the better they're able to optimize. And because platforms may be undercounting conversions due to some of these tracking issues, they may, at the end of the day, have less data to optimize off of. So say you're optimizing towards getting people to donate on your donation form, and you're only seeing, like 20 to 30 donations per month in some of your platforms, you could consider moving up the funnel and maybe optimizing to just getting people to land on the donation form itself, which would lead to more data.
Cool. And I'm curious, I know some folks on this call have already started to think about what their strategies are for depreciation. Some are just beginning. If you've tried any of these tactics already, please chat in. We'd be interested to know what folks are trying already, and if things are working or not working as well. We'd be curious. All right, so if you're on an M&R webinar, you probably already love testing. That is what we love. That is our primary passion. And there's a lot of reasons that we test, right? Learning things, trying to impress or convince people. Many good reasons for testing. And the good news is that testing is still possible without cookies. Third-party cookies made ad testing really easy, right? But it's still possible. For one thing, you can still conduct A/B testing by taking two geographically similar regions, running your content. So maybe the Philadelphia region where I live gets one type of content, the Boston region gets another type of content, run those and then compare the results. This is also a good time to reassess the performance of your other channels, such as search, which I sometimes see left out of the testing mix, and looking at other tactics like cultivational content. And in a couple of slides, Zareen actually has some pretty exciting results to share around the impact that cultivation content can have. The last thing I'll say here is that without cookies, we know that we're going to have to work harder to reach our supporters and prospects. That much is clear. I think there's some good workarounds that Zareen's talked about. There's some strategies. It's going to be a little bit harder though. But so make sure that you're making the most of those clicks and actually getting conversions out of them by testing that landing page experience. Going back to search, with search, there's of course a lot of different copy adjustments that you can test or try. For example, this example from the Union of Concerned Scientists on the left is very tactical, very institutional. The example from CARE in the center is really focused on one particular area of their work, helping refugees. But over the past year or so, we've also started to experiment with a lot of other tactics to boost search performance for our clients, such as using dynamic countdowns. So the only 9 hours left, that 9 will actually count down to from whatever date that we've set, which is perfect for end of year fundraising and Giving Tuesday. We've also tried adding site link extensions like this example in the center from CARE to just physically take up more space in the search results. Adding these 6 site link extensions has doubled or maybe even tripled the pixel size that our search ad is taking up. And then for a similar reason, using these price link extensions, like this example from Planned Parenthood Action Fund at the right. I will say we've seen a lot of success in using the price link extensions to promote the match offer, because it's really like nice visual crystallization of the impact that the matching gift can have.
We've also seen some strong results when testing cultivation messaging. So by serving Facebook ads with content that's, relating back to our clients' work to members of their email file, we can, remind supporters of the impact that their gift actually makes. This leads to more gifts overall and also larger gifts than those who don't receive the content. So cultivation content can really include anything like, related news articles, highlighting blog posts, or impact on specific individuals, which is sometimes hard to do in a fundraising ad. In this example, the content was live for about 4.5 months, and we saw, some really significant increases in both average one-time gift and average monthly gift. Some tests that ran for a shorter period of time saw flatter results. So we think of this as more of a longer-term strategy. And we also recommend keeping the content really fresh by, continuing to rotate it out on a monthly basis.
Yeah. Yeah, and in a little bit, we're going to be talking about the importance of building authenticity and how that's another way to stand out in what's going to be a messier tracking environment. And I think these ads are a great example of how you build that relationship. There's no ask associated with these. It's sharing articles. It's not even, in this example, linking to UNHCR Canada's website, right? I think that's a really powerful way to reinforce your impact. And ironically, without even asking, you're still able to raise significant revenue, even in just this short period of time we tested it, right?
So you can also test sorry, let's not forget about our landing pages. So the industry, overall tends to do a lot of testing within the ad itself. But you can also test what happens after you click an ad. So in this example, we tested routing people who click through our search ads to an intermediary interstitial page instead of directly onto the donation form. This interstitial page basically gives you a little bit more room to make your case on why the user should donate. So it can include general information about your work and its impact. Across the board, we've seen really great results from these tests that we've done with our clients. This specific one led to about a 200% increase in monthly gifts, a 35% increase in average monthly gift, and 102% increase in average one-time gift.
Yeah, what I think is so what can be difficult about designing an effective display ad is there's often so much content you want to fit in that ad, and you can't write a novel in a display ad. It's not going to work. And so what we try to do is really think holistically about the ad experience. It's not just about the display ad or video or social post that people see. It's the experience of what happens after they click through. Like, what are they seeing? What are the communications they receive from us after? What does the retargeting strategy look like? And I think this is a great example of just how powerful that additional context can be. Even comparing that, just like instead of landing people on a simple donation page, giving them this extra context can really help motivate people to not just give, but become sustaining givers.
Gwen, just a quick question on that last slide. Was that a display ad? Somebody asked some questions about the logistics around those ads.
I believe that this was something that we tested for Amnesty specifically. I believe this was something that was run through search. However, we've seen similar results coming in through display ads as well. But I think for search and display, both of those are relatively low context. Both of those environments are places where you can't fit a lot of information the way you can with a Facebook post, for example, or a 15 or 30-second YouTube video. Those are the places where this extra context can be really critical.
So in a cookieless environment, you can also test leveraging AI to zhuzh up your donation pages. So this is an example from just one of these vendors that use machine learning to sort of determine what the ad string is based on a user's previous behavior or their location, what device they're on, the time of day. So, on the back end, they're thinking like, oh, Gwen tends to spend a lot of money on baking supplies late at night. And since it's 10 p.m., maybe we'll show her, this $1,500 ask up front. Yeah, so those are
the money to give because I've been spending it on baking sheets.
Yeah, those are just two, easy things you can do really to test your landing pages. Gwen has some really cool creative examples for you coming up.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting about this is it's the same kind of targeting that we would try to apply with cookies, right? Of like trying to understand based on device, location, behaviors, like what is the right type of content to serve them. And this is like another clever workaround that doesn't rely on cookies. So one of the things that I've heard a lot from for-profit colleagues in the marketing space is this idea that without third-party cookies, creative is going to be more important than ever. And I feel like I've been telling my colleagues at Emenar that because as a creative director, that is music to my ears to make the case to do even more fun creative stuff. But even if I put my own biases as a creative director aside, I do think there's some truth to it. Without the rich targeting that's available to us with third-party cookies, it's really crucial that our creative draws people in. And I personally think that was true even with cookies, but that's another conversation for another webinar. So, and I think in some cases, of course, that means developing creative that is really stunning and unique. So this example for NRDC, we knew that bees were a species that performed really well for us. Supporters and prospects really gravitated towards bees. But we also knew that a lot of environmental organizations had bees in their content. They're very compelling. They're very cute. They're very important. So by using this really clever honey-like font, we were able to still rely on that touch point while distinguishing our ad from the many other pollinator concepts out there. And I love this SEIU concept for a similar reason.
Sounds good.
So this is an ad that we ran right after the election, when many other organizations and certainly the candidates were running a lot of ads trying to really solidify the fact that Joe Biden won. Many organizations were pivoting towards accountability for the Biden-Harris administration. And what I like about this SEIU concept is it doesn't look like a political ad. Of all the ads that I was served, all the ads that we were looking at, this looks really different. Both the music, the color palette, the use of neon, it's intentionally drawing people in, especially folks that may have a little bit of banner blindness after being targeted ad nauseum with political advertising. There we go. So that kind of creative, it's really stunning, it's unique, it's effective, it's kind of creative that is often very fun to talk about, but it's not the only tool in your toolbox right now. Like I was saying at the beginning of our conversation today, this is the time to revisit some of the foundations of what makes good creative and lean into what we all know works to reach and persuade people. So this is summarized in a resource that we published earlier this year called the Emenar Guide to Effective and Ethical Direct Response Creative. To summarize it really, really briefly, when we looked at the creative that nonprofits were sending, we noticed that the effective creative, the creative that was actually helping organizations reach their goals, answered 5 questions. What is the problem that needs to be solved? How will my action help? Why is right now the right time for me to act? Why should I care? And why should I even listen to you? But at the end of the day, our goal isn't just to raise lots of money or to win elections. Like those things are very important, but those are our short-term goals. Our ultimate long-term goal that we're all working towards is making the world a better place in whatever realm we're working in. And if we end up raising a lot of money by exploiting the people that we serve, or we win a big legislative battle by misleading our supporters, we're just trading short-term gains for long-term failure, right? So at M&R, we believe that it is possible, and it's actually deeply necessary to produce creative that isn't just effective, that doesn't just help us reach those short-term goals, but is also ethical. And so what you can do is you can use these principles to develop creative that feels really personalized and targeted, cookies be damned. For example, you can make an ad feel incredibly relevant to the person that sees it by speaking to shared values, like this Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption ad that ends with "Every child deserves a permanent, loving home." We know that's a value that Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption supporters have. They share that. That is very explicitly called out as a touch point in this ad. Or you can use things like HTML5 and rich media to develop concepts people can literally interact with. So in this Planned Parenthood example, you can use your mouse to sort of drag the Instagram stories like sliders back and forth. So you can have people actually like playing with and interacting with the concept. Something else that I continue to see perform really well across issue areas is the use of news clips and headlines. And I think as we move into a world where we don't have that robust level of tracking, we're only going to see this increase in popularity. I think that's true because, one, news organizations are a really relevant touch point, especially if you are using like the Philadelphia Inquirer or a local newspaper headline rather than a big national one. I also think these work very well because it's a great way to add urgency and a third-party validator to your organization or your issue in a really nice, tidy package. There's something about a headline and a masthead that can do a lot for you in a little space. And with people's minimal attention that we have to really capture them, like that ability to do that quickly is crucial. The other thing that I think we're going to see a lot more of is urgency. And we already see that a lot in our content. I'm guessing that a lot of us on this call are already using urgency in our ads. And I think we're going to see even more of that in cookie depreciation, because in a world with less accurate targeting, nothing says, hey, look at me, like a really bright red flashing button or an ominous countdown clock, like this example from NRDC. No shade to these tactics. These are very good tactics. You should absolutely use them. But it's not the only way that you can bring urgency into your creative. So I've gone too far. There we go. You can also use rich media to actually put someone in someone else's shoes. So you can have them experience the cold of a refugee camp. Like in this example where we're just panning through sort of an icy, frigid refugee camp. Or you can actually have them like sit and listen to the horrifying screech of locusts, like this example from CARE. That I will try to play. There we go. So that there's a very faint sort of like animal instinct clicking. I described it when we were doing our dress rehearsal as just enough to make you feel a little bit itchy. But on top of that, there's also, you see some actual images of locusts, but also just all of these like little speckles that are reminiscent of a swarm of locusts. So we're really engaging all of your senses in this concept. And by doing that, we're able to create this sense of urgency that's really driven more by emotion than pure tactics, like the example we saw on the previous slide. And because emotions trigger our brain's memory centers, it means that your concept is going to be remembered long after someone scrolls past it. It's gonna stick in someone's head. And that's always what we want as marketers.
When we have a bunch of questions coming in just about the creative, and Kristen Chauvin is doing an amazing job answering them, but I thought I might elevate them. One is that interactive Instagram ad where you saw the slider. People were asking how you set an interactive Instagram ad up where folks can actually answer a sliding poll.
Great question. So this is not an Instagram ad. This is a display ad. We were just borrowing, in Instagram stories, you have the ability to add sliders to your stories. We wanted to take that very familiar piece of Instagram and bring it to a display ad. And our hypothesis was that it was just going to be different enough because people are seeing it outside of Instagram stories. It was going to be just different enough to pique people's interest. And that was correct. You were right.
So to be clear, people aren't actually voting in this.
People are not. So that's the downside, right? Like it would be kind of cool to understand, just how many raised hands do we get for abortion access, but we don't actually capture the data here.
Then one more question. Did you need to get approval from Washington Post to use their logo in the NRDC ad? It's a very typical question we all get.
Yes, I am not a lawyer, so your legal advice may vary, but at least it's fair use to use that logo. And again, you should absolutely consult someone who is an actual lawyer. But we've used tactics like that, from including a clip from CNN to using an image of the masthead without any problems. Knock on wood.
All right, those were a couple ones that bumped up that I thought you might want to answer. I'll answer live.
Good questions. All right, let's go. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about when we're thinking about creative is something I alluded to earlier when Zareen was walking through some of the examples of our cultivation content. Invest in answering the question, who are you as the organization, and why should people listen to you? I think one of the things about cookies that was really wonderful is it allowed us to get in front of people that we already had a relationship with, or people that we figured were going to be receptive to connecting with us. And like we've talked about today, that's not entirely going away, but more and more our content is going to be in front of people who have no idea who we are. Like the examples of using search terms. Your ad might be served to someone who is interested in beekeeping, but they still might need a little bit more information about who NRDC is to be able to trust you enough to give you their credit card number. So I think cultivation content, like what Zareen was mentioning, plays a role here, as does a lot of our branding and awareness strategies. And that's something that Kristen really specializes in as well. But your creative can also make the case for that relationship. So this example from the Fight for 15, I love this because it uses 15s from local protests. These are all just photos that were shot at rallies and protests. And they use those to push for a higher minimum wage in Wisconsin. You see that geo-targeting here again. While this NWLC ad sort of dispenses with the pretty graphics, because sometimes your creative doesn't need to be pretty, to show an image that is likely very familiar to a lot of the parents they are trying to reach, because childcare is an absolute mess right now. And in both of these cases, NWLC and the Fight for 15 are reflecting the lived experiences of their supporters and prospects. They know who they're trying to talk to. They know what they're experiencing. They know what they're seeing, what they're stressing about, and they're showing that they get it through the kinds of images and creative decisions they make. That's the start of beginning to answer these questions and building that kind of relationship that's going to make someone say, oh, I recognize that logo. I've seen that ad. I'm going to stop and look at it for just a fraction of a second longer. And sometimes, like in this game, like that fraction of a second is crucial to actually raising more money or getting more voters or collecting more actions.
Gwen, I got another great question that I think is worth a little bit more deeper discussion. Emily's asking about noticing how many of the ad examples don't use people in them, which sometimes makes sense for things like NRDC, but she's curious about how about some of the other examples. like results when using ads with more graphics and text. I think this is a good time to also talk about our reduction in using people in some of our ads these days.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do see some organizations aren't using people as much because they are concerned that using an image of, for example, a refugee would be exploitative, because in some cases we're not sure if that refugee consents to having their image used for fundraising purposes. On the flip side, I do see a lot more environmental organizations wanting to use more people than animals in their work, because for a long time in the environmental space, we've been very focused on animals and nature and ignoring the very real impacts that climate change, environmental injustice has on communities, in particular, low-income communities and communities of color. So I do think that it's not fully like the entire industry is moving away from people. I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. What I will say in terms of what we've seen in our creative is that at times when we use an image of a person, if that person doesn't exactly reflect the identity and experience of the people we're trying to talk to on the supporter side, it doesn't work. So if I were to show in this NWLC ad, image of a mother and her son, if you are a parent who is parenting 2 girls, you might see that and just be like, it's not relevant to me. And so in some cases, we found that avoiding images of people allows us to make an ad that is more relevant to more groups of people. Does that answer your question? I feel like we could talk about that for like another 2 hours, because it's really fascinating to see how people respond or don't respond to images of objects versus animals versus people.
She said yes. It did answer her question.
Try not to look at the chat because there's a lot happening there and I can't read and talk at the same time. Awesome. Any other questions? All right.
We've had a lot of questions throughout, Gwen and Zareen, and Kristen and Chauvin's been answering them in. But if there's anyone that had a question that didn't get answered in the rapid flow of questions, this is a chance to either put it in the chat if you're a person who likes chatting, or raise your hand and we'll call on you. Okay.
Well, folks are sort of thinking about questions. Why don't you bring it home for us?
Yeah, great. So that segued really nicely into the sort of like end of our presentation. So thank you all so much for joining us at this very busy time of the year. We have a poll question going up in the chat. We are really interested to see, which of these tactics you all have been trying or are interested in trying in 2022. Yeah, and once you're done answering that poll question, definitely feel free to come off mute and ask us some questions. We have about 4 minutes.
There's one question first. How will Google Analytics be impacted by depreciation?
Serena, I'm gonna have you answer that one. I am not sure.
I'm not sure if I can give an official answer. Kristen, do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think Google Analytics should be affected very much, since it's generally based on a source code and a click-through, and is not very cookie based. So I would expect to see pretty minimal impact for GA.
Yeah, just sort of one of the reasons why we recommend sort of, looking into your CRM data and Google Analytics, because those places aren't going to be as affected by, cookie depreciation as the actual platform as well.
Another question for you. What's the difference between try and test?
I will say testing usually involves setting aside very distinct tests, like a test and control audience, determining the audience size you need for statistical significance, really making a rigorous, statistically sound test. Our data analytics friends are not on the call, but they'd be very proud of me for saying that. A try is more, we're gonna run these geo-targeted ads. We're gonna see how the response fares, and you know your programs better than anyone else. So what is a good return on ad spend versus a bad one. Sometimes you just have to like run something and see how it performs. And you may not need a statistically rigorous test to prove whether or not it's a good tactic for you.
I have what I think is a provocative question from Angie, which is, so to sum up, we are waiting for massive ad networks and other sites to get enough consent to get back to using highly targeted ads again. I lifted my voice at the end to show that it's a question.
Yeah, I mean, I would say kind of yes, but it doesn't mean we need to sit on our heels and just run programs that we can't actually track performance on, that have, you know, creative that's all over the place. There are still things that you can do while the industry is catching up. That doesn't mean you have to wait around or put up with a lackluster program. I don't know, Zareen, feel free to disagree with me if you have a hot take.
Another question around cultivation, which is, how long would you run cultivation ad sets before swapping them out for solicitation ad sets for boosted donation performance?
So typically we run the cultivation content in like we will split our audiences that we're like running donation focused asks to, and for, you know, the test audience we'll run cultivation and a donation ask, and that's where we typically see that lift in conversion rate and average gift. In the example that we shared previously, that test was running for about 4 to 5 months. And we were able to, you know, sort of just decide that this was like a good thing to run on an ongoing basis because of the results.
I think we got 1 minute left. Oh, here you go. From Casey, a good question to close us out. How would you respond to leadership demanding a move away from digital until it can prove the ROI? Oh, Casey, we all feel for you. Go ahead, Gwen and Zareen.
Do you want to go first, Zareen?
That is a tough question to answer in 1 minute. I would say that there are still a lot of ways you can, you know, track digital. We went through some of them. I would not completely give up on digital fundraising in the next year, just because there isn't, you know, a clear path forward just yet.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be weird. It's going to be wonky, but it's not impossible. And certainly having a little less data, having a little less effective targeting is better than having no ads or no digital presence at all for however long it takes for the industry to get its act together. Also, maybe bribery, maybe make them some cookies, see if that helps.
All the cookie recipes we mentioned are in the deck, so you'll see those when you get the deck after this recording. It's a lot of cookies, y'all. We eat a lot of cookies around here.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much. Deck and recipes coming very shortly, and we'll also include our contact information. We are happy to talk for many more hours about this. And if you are doing end of year fundraising, good luck. Hang in there, and we can't wait to see you again.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.